Good morning, guys. The rise of nationalism in Europe, part 2, and the topic is the making of nationalism in Europe. The making of nationalism in Europe. Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons whose rulers had their autonomous territory. Eastern and Central Europe were under autocratic monarchies, within the territories of which lived diverse people. They did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity or a common culture. Often they even spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. Now, Habsburg Empire. The Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria-Hungary, for example, was a patchwork of many different regions and peoples. It included the Alpine regions in which the Tyrol, Austria and Sudetenland as well as Bohemia where the aristocracy was predominantly German-speaking. It also included the Italian-speaking provinces of Lombardy and Venetia. In Hungary, half of the population spoke Magyar, while the other half spoke a variety of dialects. In Galicia, the aristocracy spoke Polish. Besides these three dominant groups, there also lived a mass of subject peasants peoples. Bohemians and Slovaks to the north, Slovens in Carniola, Croats to the south, and Romans to east in Transylvania. The aristocracy and the new middle class, socially and politically a landed aristocracy, was dominant class on the continent. The members of this class were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. They spoke French for purposes of diplomacy and in high society. This aristocracy was, however, numerically a small group. The majority of population was made up of peasantry. Industrial production and trade meant the growth of towns and the emergence of commercial classes. Industrialization began in England in the second half of the 18th century. New social groups came into being: working class population and middle class population, made up of industrialists, businessmen, and professionals. It was among the educated liberal middle classes that the ideas of national unity, abolition of aristocratic privileges gained popularity. So, what did liberal nationalism stand for? The term liberalism derives from the Latin root liberals, meaning free. For the new middle classes, liberalism stood for freedom of the individual and equality of all before the law. Politically, it emphasized the concept of government by consent. For French Revolution, liberalism stood for the end of autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution and representative government through parliament. For liberals, it stressed the inviolability of private property. Economically, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and abolition of state-imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. Napoleon's administrative measures had created out of countless small principalities a confederation of 39 states. Each of these possessed its own currency and weights and measures. Duties were often levied according to weight and measures. This involved time-consuming calculation. For example, unit of measure of textile was LA that time. Such conditions were viewed as obstacles to economic exchange and growth by the new commercial classes. Then in 1834, a custom union or Zollverein was formed at the initiative of Prussia. The union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2. A wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wider nationalist sentiments growing at that time. A new conservatism after 1815. Following the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, European governments were driven by a spirit of conservatism. Conservatives believed that established traditional institutions of state and society, like the monarchy, the church, social hierarchies, property, and the family, should be preserved. But they realized from the changes initiated by Napoleon that modernization could in fact strengthen traditional institutions. A modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom could strengthen the autocratic monarchies of Europe. Treaty of Vienna. In 1815, representatives of the European powers, Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, met at Vienna to draw up a settlement for Europe. The Congress was hosted by the Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich. It has the object of undoing most of the changes that had come about in Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. The Bourbon dynasty was restored to power. A series of states set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in future. The main intention was to restore the monarchies that had been overthrown by Napoleon. Conservative regimes set up in 1815 were autocratic because they did not tolerate criticism and dissent. They sought to curb activities that questioned the legitimacy of autocratic governments. Most of them imposed censorship laws to control what was said in newspapers, books, plays, and songs. But the memory of French Revolution continued to inspire liberals. One of the major issues taken up by the liberal nationalists was freedom of the press. The revolutionaries. The fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground. Secret societies sprang up in many European states to train revolutionaries and spread their ideas. To be revolutionary at this time meant a commitment to oppose monarchical forms and to fight for liberty and freedom. Most revolutionaries also saw the creation of nation states as a necessary part of this struggle for freedom. One of them was Giuseppe Mazzini, an Italian revolutionary. Born in Genoa in 1807, he became a member of the secret society of Carbonari. As a young man of 24, he was sent into exile in 1831 for attempting a revolution in Liguria. He founded two more societies. First, Young Italy in Marseilles. Second, Young Europe in Bern. Mazzini believed that God had intended nations to be the natural units of mankind. So, Italy had to be forged into a single unified republic within a wider alliance of nations. This unification alone could be the basis of Italian liberty. Mazzini's relentless opposition to monarchy and his vision of democratic republics frightened the conservatives. Metternich described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. So this was a part 2. Chapter will be continued